feels like the funeral home she's going
Spirit of life, who knows us each by name, yet is beyond all naming. Ground of being that is always changing, always becoming, out on the cusp between what is and what could be. Spirit of becoming, in this hour we spend together, be with us and remind us how far we've come and how far love and justice are calling us to go. Come, let us worship together.
As is our custom, if you'd like to, excuse me, if you'd like to come light a candle for a joy, a challenge, or just to bring more light into this room, please do so while we sit in stillness listening to the prelude.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. No, I stand my ground. No, I won't back down. Won't be turned around, and I'll keep this world from dragging me down. No, I won't back down. Yes, I'll stand my ground. I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. I won't back down. Hey, I'll stand my ground, and I won't back down. Yeah, I know what's right. I got just one life, and in a world that's trying to push me around, I will stand my ground. No, I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I'm gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. No, I won't back down. No, I won't back down.
Please rise in body or spirit for our chalice lighting and spoken affirmation. Pat Yareb Litchi wrote these words: persist in faith. We face a challenge to democracy, a challenge that calls us to hope in moments of despair, a challenge that asks us to persist in the faith, that we can and must make a difference. May our flaming chalice recommit us to truth in our words and our actions, that we may live as we believe people should live. Join me as together we remind ourselves of our affirmation that is the cornerstone of our free tradition. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. Lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. Peace, peace, peace. Join me in the words now on the screen. We light this peace candle to remind us of all the places in the world where there is no peace. You may be seated. Our opening thought is provided by the Reverend Peggy Clark and the Reverend Crystal Gracel Schmidt. Today's worship service, the premise is that that our democracy is in danger, but we are not powerless. We all have meaningful ways to save our democratic system. One way is to commit to being an active part of civil society, which means committing to our institutions. This includes our home churches and UU Social Justice as the only national UU organization lobbying for our values on the Hill. It is our hope that people will leave worship today feeling empowered and connected and more hopeful about what's next for our collective work and our nation. Our first song is number 298, Wake Now My Senses.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in awe. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wait now my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share
Unitarian Universalism is a living, changing faith. And being a living, changing faith means that any one of us can change what we believe if we experience a deeper truth that is different or new. But in order to change, we have to be open to new thoughts, new ideas, and new experiences. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a congregation that made a big change many years ago, and they made this change because a group of people got together and leveraged their collective power. That just means that they came together and made a plan, in this case, about how they would try to get their church to make a change. Jessica York, Director of Congregational Life at the UUA, wrote a wonderful version of this story that's featured in Toolbox of Faith, a Tapestry of Faith curriculum. But this is my own telling of this story. Our story takes place 75 years ago when most faith communities in the United States were segregated. Segregation was one way the United States tried to keep Black people in particular separated from white people. Some states required churches to be segregated. Others were segregated because all the other churches around them did it, or because that's just the way things had always been done. Now, we like to think of our UU faith as progressive, as liberal, as trendsetters. But in 1948, the first Unitarian Society of Chicago was segregated. Their church was in a racially diverse neighborhood where people of many colors lived, but only white people were allowed to go to that church. One day, a large group of church members started to organize, to collect their power, and take action against racism in their church. The church's minister, Reverend Leslie Pennington, and a man named James Luther Adams were ready to move things forward. Reverend Adams was a famous theologian and ethicist. He taught at the Meadville Lombard Theological School, and he was also on the church's board. Adams and Pennington together made a proposal to the church board to desegregate the church. They knew this was the right thing to do. They knew it was what their faith guided them to do. And most church members wanted the church to welcome people, no matter what color their skin was. But one member of the board didn't. "Your new program is making desegregation into a creed," he said. "You're asking everyone in our church to say they believe desegregating or inviting, even recruiting people of color to attend church here is a good way to tackle racism. What if some members don't believe this?" And so they talked and argued. Eventually, everyone became tired and frustrated. They were, as we say in the DC area, gridlocked. Just then, Reverend Adams remembered a piece of wisdom. It's best to listen twice as much as we speak. So instead of arguing his point of view yet again, he asked the person who really didn't want the church to desegregate a question. "What do you say is the purpose of this church?" Somehow, that got everyone's attention. What was the purpose of the church? The board member Adams had been arguing with thought for a moment and said, "Okay, Jim, the purpose of this church is to get hold of people like me and change them." And that is the story of how the First Unitarian Society of Chicago successfully desegregated. The problems that we face here and now in 2023 sometimes seem gridlocked, just like the Chicago Church's board was in our story. Challenges we face as individuals and families, congregations and neighborhoods, and even as a whole country can feel so big that we'll never find a way through them. And yet, people have, again and again, found our way through massive challenges, sometimes by making a way when there was no way to begin with. Not by bullying one another, not through coercing one another, but by staying at the table, staying in conversation, by refusing to stay quiet when we see injustice, by refusing to back down, by collecting the power we each have and leveraging that collective power in the service of our faith and values. Just like singing with hundreds of people or taking to the streets with thousands of other people showing up for justice, taking action with a lot of others is powerful. And after today's service, every single person will be given an opportunity to take action in the service of our faith and values. But our chance to leverage our collective power with other UUs does not end today. If you or your congregation would like to learn how you can take collective action at the federal level to help get things done on Capitol Hill, I hope that you will be in touch with us at UUs for Social Justice, UUSJ. And I hope you liked today's story. I invite you now into a time of prayer. Spirit of life, source of all, to this beautiful place and hallowed time, we bring hearts grateful for life's blessings and broken for life's suffering. We give thanks for this new day, for love and beauty, comfort and kinship, for the mysterious way the new springs out of the old, the possible out of the seemingly impossible. We hold in our hearts leaders in every nation who are struggling to respond to all manner of crises, people displaced by war, by climate crisis, by political repression, all those upon whose backs national policies fall. We pray for mercy and compassion to be in and with and among leaders of all kinds, for them to be filled with the Spirit that helps us all to do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it's politically unpopular. We lift up one another today, and we lift up our very own hearts, for in this life it is so easy to miss the mark, to behave in ways that don't reflect who we are at our best. May the care and support we find here today give us comfort amid our sorrows and fears, enable us to let go of our egos and say sorry, make amends, and forgive when the time is right. May this faith and congregation, imperfect as they may be, help us to know we are loved just as we are, but too much to let us stay that way. And when it seems like nothing will ever get better, or the world is about to end, may the power that makes all things new remind us of how often that feeling signals that something new is just beginning. Amen. Blessed be.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
TikTok tells us that men think about the Roman Empire every day. I mean, who are you going to believe if not TikTok? I do not think about the Roman Empire really very much at all, but I do think about the American Empire. It really does have my attention. Mirroring the innocence of the mid and late 20th century, I really grew up believing that the United States was the best nation that ever existed. And that opinion came to me from my white immigrant family, grateful for opportunity and the freedom of economic prosperity. Which I have to say is a little funny because they were so poor, and yet they just loved this country. The reality, though, is that over time, our democracy has begun to fade. And whether or not children are told this is the best nation in the history of nations doesn't alter our downward trajectory. So as much as we'd like to say that we've been a democracy since 1776, or maybe from the ratification of the Constitution in 1788, we've really mostly been a democracy in process until the realization of our potential with the passing of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. With the codification of inclusion at the ballot booth, the United States of America became worthy of the admiration of democracies, both realized and struggling around the world. Our system of government, standing on a strong foundation of law, had the full support of our nation's people and our institutions, creating what we thought was an unbreakable network ensuring equal access to our founding promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But as we approach the 60th anniversary of that peak moment, most Americans are aware that our democracy is on a downward slide. There are many key markers that support this suspicion, including our decline on the Polity Index that moved us below the threshold of full democracy in recent history. President Joe Biden warned us just a few weeks ago that democracy is at risk, that the threat to our institutions and our Constitution is serious, noting extremism and increasingly disturbing threats of violence on our leaders. And of course, we don't really need scholars or our president telling us what we can see and hear for ourselves, right? The words chaos and dysfunction and infighting have become common in our national headlines. And our government just seems to grind to a halt over and over again. Strong, healthy democracies require what we call civil society. Civil society consists of all the voluntary organizations where people gather autonomous from the state. These groups might have some state support, function, interaction, but they are independent of state controls. They have their own agenda and goals. they are concerned with public ends, but they aren't seeking state power. They exist for many reasons, but one is to influence law, culture, and the ways we live together. They are part of the larger piece of community living, valuing pluralism, inclusion, and a wide range of life experience and thought. The organizations that populate civil society include educators who advocate for curriculum development to train the next generation of thinkers and leaders, and climate activists who push against corporate influence, and librarians who ensure access to a diversity of ideas, and workers who leverage their collective power to ensure fair wages and protections. Civil society includes museums that preserve our history, dance companies that celebrate self-expression, and community theaters where new philosophies are given language and an audience. Cults are not part of civil society. They want to separate people from the mainstream, and yoga groups don't generally qualify because they have no interest in influencing public life. Churches, on the other hand, do. So do all of our UU organizations, like Ministry for Earth, like our state action networks, and UUSJ, our UU Voice on the Hill. All of these institutions are part of the fabric of civil society, without which we don't have an authentic democracy. Scholars tell us that democracies don't collapse because of a single influential person. They collapse because the people who should know better align themselves with stronger, more dangerous personalities. They themselves aren't fascist, communist, extremists. They're just too weakly committed to democracy and are ultimately opportunists who say what they think they need to say to either get or to keep power. Civil society is one of the key levers to keep these people in check. Groups that are themselves run democratically, giving everyone the experience of having a voice and a vote, with deep membership rosters of concerned and engaged citizens, or public forums for open discussion, become a counterbalance to self-serving individuals. These organizations create occasions for influence and can reward opportunists with the popularity or power they seek without requiring them to compromise their commitment to democratic systems. They can also create and engage systems of social accountability that keep some of these people in check. We are, frankly, doing it right now by having this conversation. Totalitarian nations have no civil society. The more civil society in a country, the more democratic it can be. There are very few fully totalitarian nations, but we can see these systems of government increase as civil society decreases. North Korea is a completely totalitarian system with no visible counter to the current government. China used to be more complete, but civil society is growing there. And when nations like Russia want to increase government control, they shut down parts of civil society, as does every autocrat seeking to consolidate his or her power. Voluntary organizations are a crucial part of any healthy, transparent, and legitimate democratic system. We can determine the vitality of a democracy by the integration of these groups in the fabric of the nation. Faith-based organizations are historically some of the most difficult to terminate because they're often seen as the moral centers of the community. Shutting them down forces the government to admit a lack of concern with morality, an act most citizens find alarming. Instead, many authoritarian regimes work to befriend religious institutions, seeking to align religious power centers with their own. We can see it happening here in the United States with evangelical churches who have become supporters of some of the more dangerous factions in our current system. This makes our own position as liberal religious denomination all the more necessary in our current political climate. We continue to have the moral authority to counter the current trajectory and can stand against the wave of conservative religious alignment with the radical right-wing political movement. Our existence, our internal health and strength is an essential part of what can turn the tide of American democratic legitimacy. It is our witness to pluralism, an embrace of science as a source of truth, our own democratic structures, our collective voice for choice, for education, for inclusion, and our training of a new leadership class that demonstrates the need for our witness and the centrality of our voice as part of civil society right now, at this moment in history. And of course, this comes at the same time religion is on a steep decline in American culture. Across the country, Unitarian Universalist churches have seen a dramatic reduction in membership. We lost 18,000 children from our RE programs in the last 10 years. 18,000 children. We've lost 100,000 members in the last 50 years. In 2020, the average size of a UU congregation was half the size as 20 years earlier. So from 2000 to 2020, our congregations cut in half. And we're not alone in this free fall, and as liberal religion declines in national influence, so does American democracy. I don't think these things are unrelated. Just as people are turning away from institutional religion, the demons of authoritarianism are gaining ground. When the moral centers lose influence and can no longer claim to be our collective conscience, it's easier for alternatives to take root. Our voices get weaker and are harder to hear. But let's not pretend we are inaudible. There are close to 200,000 people in UU churches. We have not given up our space at the table, nor our moral authority, even if the tide of totalitarianism hopes to wash over us. This is evidenced at the very least by our decision to bring this service to our congregation, as so many other UU congregations are doing. We are interdependent, interconnected, and committed to holding up our shared liberal religious values with all of our sister churches across the country. Power Sunday comes from UUs for Social Justice. UUSJ was founded originally by a circle of UU churches in the Washington, D.C. area who wanted to leverage their geographic location to influence the federal conversation. About 2 years ago, UUSJ broke out of that model and opened to UUs around the country to become our collective voice, not just those positioned so closely to DC power centers. And for full transparency, I joined the UUSJ board when they went looking for people outside of the DC area. UUSJ is a small organization. There's no full-time staff, and like so many of our UU groups doing the work of our faith, they're largely volunteer, but with the help of the executive director, they've had an outsized influence in federal policy conversations. This worship service is designed to get the word out about both our UU potential as a faith community through UUSJ in national discussions and to hold up this institution as part of civil society in need of support in these fragile days of our democracy. We're going to do this again hopefully next year and the year after, and when we do, we're going to join collectively with all the other UUs for some kind of shared action, some way of advocating for our values together. Scholars might tell us that as American democracy is deconsolidating, they might tell us it is deconsolidating, but it is far from collapse. Even through significant challenges, this system is holding. With the kickoff of Power Sunday, UU congregations can step into our moral authority in partnership with each other and other liberal religious members of civil society to hold strong against the tide of authoritarianism. Through our connection with UUSJ, the building of our collective power on the Hill, and as a partner with other denominations also holding back the waves of authoritarianism, Unitarian Universalists play a key role in keeping our democracy strong. Today in churches around the country, we are raising our shared consciousness, holding up our critical place in the democratic fabric of our nation, tuning our collective voice, and reminding Unitarian Universalists that we are necessary, that we are not alone, and that in this fragile moment of American history, we are powerful.
Hi, my name is Pablo de Jesus, and I'm the Executive Director of Unitarian Universalists for Social Justice. And I want to thank you for joining us on Power Sunday. It's important that Unitarian Universalists step into our power, gather our power, leverage our power. It's important that we engage our federal decision makers. And you can do that with Unitarian Universalists for Social Justice. I invite you to make donations to us at www.uusj.org. And if your congregation wants to send a check, which we will deeply appreciate, you can do so at our address on that same webpage. Now is the moment for Unitarian Universalists to gather together and build a movement to lift our values and voices on Capitol Hill. It's the best way that we can have systemic change influence. So I invite you to join UUSJ, explore our webpage, and make a donation if you can. Thank you.
Will you be with me? Will you see me through? When the world is harsh, can I count on you? We have come this far, now it's up to you to be there. I stood up for you, knowing I might never have the chance to show my heart in ways that others learn to take for granted. And now I am asking you, will you be with me? Will you see me through? When the world is harsh, can I count on you? We have come this far, now it's up to you to be there. For this you don't understand. You ask why I feel so strongly about holding up this love in front of
free. We are waking to be free. We are working to be free, free of hate, greed, and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom, that is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world would die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit for the closing and extinguishing the chalice. Maureen Killeran brings us these words, closing words for hard times. No matter how weak or frightened we may feel, we each have gifts that can make a difference. In this coming week, may you do at least one thing to support the broken, to welcome the stranger, to celebrate what is worthy, to do the work of justice and love. Be strong, be connected. Each day act so you may be a little more whole. In our on the bulletin board, Jan has posted 3 different social justice things that TXUUJM is asking. Please join me in saying the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you. You may be seated.